Hello, everyone. I'm Jean-Claude at BeyondMystic, and welcome to this very special episode of the Deep Woo-Woo. Tonight, of course, our title is Postures of Power, Egyptian Postures of Power by Mr. Jason QUITT. You can find his work and his book here on Amazon. It's entitled Egyptian Postures of Power, and you can find him also on Twitter at Jason_QUITT, and finally on the web at thecrystalsun.com. Mr. Jason QUITT, welcome to the show. On Twitter at Jason_.
Thank you for having me.
You have an open window. Oh, there you go. We had an echo there. Okay, we're back. Hold on.
Right. I don't think it was me.
Can you hear me okay now?
Yeah, I could hear you good.
Welcome to the show, Jason. Sorry about that weird start there.
No, a fellow Canadian, same province. I mean, this is awesome.
Thank you for being here. And thank you, everyone, for joining us here on this live interactive show. We are going to be talking about tonight, of course, the latest edition of Jason's book, The Egyptian Postures of Power. But before we get into that, I want to share something a little bit personal with you, the audience members. I've known Jason for quite some time now. I believe it was 2015 or 16. And I got to tell you, at that time, I wasn't the person I am now. I was somewhere in transition between the old world and the new world. And for a long time there, I was having difficulty in the sense that I had my illusions of the old world had been shattered. So I knew I no longer had a place in it, but I did not yet know what my place was going to be in this new world. And I remember listening to Jason QUITT this one night on Fade to Black with Jimmy Church. I'm like, that guy's pretty cool. I got to talk to that guy. And so Jason helped me out quite a bit in those years, trying to understand how to really connect with your center, to connect with your soul mission and your contract, and to not fear that unknown and that self-actualization process. Jason, you really helped me out with that. And I want to take this opportunity here on the live show to say a big thank you to you, sir.
No, that's really amazing to hear. And it's like when you invited me on the show, I'm like, of course, like I've known you for so long, but I didn't really know you had a show. So now that I know, of course, I'm going to be coming here. I'm going to be supporting you and everything. And it looks like you're doing great in what you're presenting.
Yeah. Well, I've had a rough start. I've been deleted quite a few times already. Apparently, there's some topics here on YouTube we're not allowed to talk about. And your book touches on some of those topics, of course, because they're all about self-empowering. And of course, the Matrix here doesn't like that. They want really good slaves and really good batteries for the energy extraction matrix. So as soon as you teach people how to disconnect from that, you somehow get on somebody's radar. And that was the case for me. But before we get into that, Jason, I wanted to ask you, our first-time guest, a question, and it goes like this. How did universe conspire to bring you to the work you're doing today?
Oh, that is a very, very long story. But I would say that I was going through an awakening process in my early 20s, and it was very difficult. I started to have outer body experiences. I didn't know what was going on. I really thought I was going insane, but I knew that I wasn't insane, and luckily I had a firm grip of reality. And I tried to kind of find my way in this. And this was before YouTube. I always tell the story. This is before YouTube. So I'm just, searching AOL or Yahoo for answers.
Right.
And it was difficult to find. And I really did feel alone in this. I couldn't really talk to anybody. I even went and spoke to like rabbis and priests, and it was almost like they didn't know what to tell me, so I really felt alone in what I was dealing with. And I started to receive messages in these outer body experiences in my early 20s. And what these messages basically told me was I was sick, which I found very interesting, that these messages that would come to me was, you have an illness, but it's an energetic illness, and it's that your energy is weak, which makes you susceptible to physical conditions in the future. Your energy is weak, which means that things can attack you, could attach to you, could manipulate and pull you. And through this awakening process, it was told to me that I needed to learn how to strengthen and heal my energy bodies if I was going to progress in this world. And I took that very seriously because nobody else was helping me. And I was led into, the first thing I was led into was, well, first it was diet, nutrition, drink good water, stop drinking tap water, just
Right.
things like this. But then it was, you need to heal your energy. And that's what got me into Chinese traditional Qigong. And that's the first thing that I started to do. And it was the Chinese traditional Qigong. It was a method called Qi Lao. I'm not sure if you heard of this method. It's called the pour Qi up and pour Qi down method of Qigong. In fact, if you remember Greg Braden, he had this VHS. I had this on VHS. That's how I'm dating myself here. We had this VHS with Braden, and they were showing these Qigong masters shrinking a tumor cell on an ultrasound. I don't know if you remember that. That was very popular, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And that was the Qi Lao Institute in China that was doing that. So I was very interested into that. And my cousin, who was really kind of like my aunt because she's the same age as my mother, she was getting into Qigong the same time as me. And when she heard what was going on with me, she said, "You got to come with me to this Qigong class. I know this teacher. You got to come with me." So I started to go and learn traditional Qi Lao Qigong from this instructor. And I practiced that. Like, I was religious when it came to Qigong. I practiced that at least 2 to 3 times a day. But I didn't feel anything. I was still like numb. Like, I didn't understand that there was such a thing as a feeling. You could hear about energy and woo and all this stuff.
Right.
And it's a cool concept for your mind, right? But I didn't realize you could actually feel this stuff. And it took about a year of practicing Qi Lao Qigong, where suddenly something just clicked or turned on, where I started to feel again. And it started like with my emotions. I started to feel emotions. It's like I wasn't numb anymore. I started to feel energy between my hands. So it's like, when you go to put your hands together, it feels like it's 2 magnets that are repelling each other. And that doesn't go away. It's always feels like that now. But I didn't feel that before I started practicing Qigong. So something awakened. And from more practice, I started to feel internal flows. So I started to feel energy going through the body. I started to feel a lot of pain. This is when people think of like the spiritual or healing journey, we have to remember that it's a process. And usually when it starts to open things up, it may not be smiles and rainbows. It's you're looking at your shadow self. You're looking at what you've been carrying for so many years. And that could be very painful. So I started to feel a lot of pain in my body. If I would eat certain foods, I would get certain pains in my body. And I realized that the Qigong was sensitizing me to my own feeling, my own physical nature, or my body consciousness was now awakening itself. So the more I practiced, the more I can start to gauge and feel what is energy, which is just basically sensitivity to your surroundings and what's inside of you. And when I mean outside of you is I started to be able to kind of read or pick up on the energy of environments when you do Qigong. And what that means is I could like step into a space, and sometimes I would go to a place and it feels like the wind is being pulled out of your body, or the air is being pulled out of your body, or you have a pressure on you, or you just need to get out of there. And I started to realize that there are energies in spaces too, and they need to be healed as well, not just the human body. Yeah. And then you start to sensitize yourself to things that you can't see. So I would, you could be sitting there meditating, and I could feel, or doing Qigong, and you would feel like somebody walked by you, and you open your eyes, there's nobody there. So it's like,
or was there,
right? So this whole other like world,
right?
starts to kind of open up in front of you. And it's, even though there's a lot of hardship, I would say, you have to face certain things. It's not an easy task. It's kind of showing you this kind of spiritual magic that has always been a part of our lives. It's part of us, and it's everywhere. And it's been shut off for so long that it's like, it's difficult to start moving back towards it. But once it's there, it's there. It's like, it's common now. That's just the way I feel, the way I experience. And so that's how I got into this whole subject, was actually having these out-of-body experiences, having these intrusions or astral abductions, which weren't fun, but they taught me that this world is not just the world we've been taught as this 3D model of physical creation, that it's actually a spiritual world. There's dimensions, planes, and you can shift your consciousness from here to other places. So you can experience past lives and bring those, a lot of people bring those traumas into this life. And we could use our consciousness to almost collapse time to heal between the lifetimes. And then suddenly something inside of you here is now better because of what you've done with things in your past or past timelines. So for me, it's been kind of like going headfirst into this topic.
Going headfirst into the deep end of the woo-woo, indeed.
And not stopping. It's just a free fall.
Right. Well,
free
before
fall.
you go too far, let me backtrack on a couple of things you said there. I didn't want to interrupt you. It's your first time on the show. People are absolutely excited to hear what you're saying. You're getting a lot of love in the chat. But yes, the deep woo, and what you just talked about, that experiencing that energy for the first time, you cannot unlearn that or unfeel that. You feel it, you realize that you're part of something much bigger. I try to explain to my kids that we're actually, there's no separation between us. We're in the same soup, basically. And once you realize that you're a fish in the water and there's water, you can maneuver with that water. So similar to you, I started this process with Reiki. So I was already into the energy work. So by the time I got into the Neigong at my Kung Fu school, it made sense to me. I was already into the feeling and moving energy. But when I started meeting these individuals, suddenly I realized, whoa, these guys have it at a way, way, way higher degree. And this is all about self-mastery. So I was really interested in all of that. So when you started getting back into the Egyptian postures of power and how your body's an antenna to receive and to transmit through all of this energetic soup that we're in, I'm like, okay, now we're onto something. And I was really impressed with your first book. I gave it to somebody, or I lent it to somebody, but it never came back. So of course I had to get the second one here as soon as you put it out on pre-order a couple of months ago. So I'm really interested to get into that. But a couple of things. You mentioned the out of body. My first experience also was as a teenager. I woke up one night and there was this little light at the bottom of the door to my bedroom. And I was thinking, somebody left a light open in the hallway. So I walked up to go turn off that light in the hallway. And as I got to the door, I was trying to grab the door. I couldn't grab the door. I was like, what the hell's going on? And I looked back, I'm like, oh, it was me glowing. So I was out of my body at that point. It really shook me. And then I started reading books about it, like you. At that time, there was no Google or the internet. So I had to go to libraries and stuff to try to learn about all of this stuff. So it got me thinking that we were more than, of course, just these physical meat sacks, as you said. The emotional body, feeling your emotions, you just mentioned it's not all roses, I believe is what you said. It is difficult. And on my show, we talk about this self-mastery, but to get to there, you also have to go through that core wound. And what's interesting now is the way universe is providing and conspiring at this time, it's actually helping us and propelling us towards going through that core wound and becoming these bigger, better versions of ourselves here as we move into the age of Aquarius. And I find that people doing the work as you're doing here, and specifically with this book, you're a stepping stone to a lot of people understanding that and mastering how they can maneuver their energy, how they can increase their energy set. And we're going to get into that in the book here. And how, first of all, before you do that, you have to cut the bleeding. And of course, that is detaching from that energy extraction matrix that's on the planet to capture all of that. Fabulous introduction. Let me get into quickly here, the Kundalini stuff. As I mentioned before, it's been a tough ride here on Beyond Mystic. And one of the reasons was this series that I started with Rihanna Watson at the offset of the first channel. And here she wrote a book, Brave, Beautiful, and Bearing It All. And the point was not necessarily all the yoga, but it was the healer within. And when I got through reading the first 3 or 4 chapters in her book, I realized that she was talking about using her body as an antenna to heal specific frequencies. So I was like, whoa, this is deep knowledge, and some people on the planet are starting to remember that. So yes, there are the mystery schools out there that are teaching that. They're still closed. Maybe they're opening up slowly but surely to these times. But people, through our energy, through our DNA, are starting to remember these things also. Where did you start to remember that? I know you've had some experiences. You had the voices, as you just described. But where did you start to have these sudden deep knowings of this energy work, and that you were more than just your body, that you were, in fact, you were an antenna? How did that awakening happen for you, Jason?
Well, I was doing Qigong for, I think, a couple years before the Egyptian things started to happen to me.
Mm-hmm.
And the Egyptian journeys really took me to another level completely, because, okay, I would go to sleep at night, I'd be taken out of my body, or I would just kind of wake up in this temple, which I don't know if it was like a past life remembering or a past life reliving, or this was something new. But I would just end up in this temple. There would be an Egyptian teacher standing in front of me. They looked just like those Egyptian statues. And they wouldn't talk to me. They would just stand in front of me holding a posture. And I just inherently knew that I had to copy this person. So as I would stand there and copy their posture, what I felt was this thing just open up above my head. And it felt like a waterfall. So you've been under a waterfall before. You can feel
Mm-hmm.
that pressure and that flow just
Mm-hmm.
hitting the top of your head. And that's exactly what it felt like. But instead of water, it felt like solar radiation. So it was like this, it was like a fire, this heat that went right through the crown chakra, and it went through every cell in my body. And this heat, it was like my body was just vibrating. And I would wake up in my bed. So I'd be, wake up in my bed on my back in these postures, even with my left leg sticking up. Okay. So I became this statue in my dream. And even though I'm awake in the bed, I could still feel this thing opened and the energy going through me as I'm awake in bed. And the moment I changed my posture, suddenly it just closed up, don't feel it anymore. And that was, at that time, that was the most powerful experience that I've ever had in Qigong, is in these postures. And I immediately realized that the body itself is kind of like a tuning fork.
Mm-hmm.
And just like how you have the old antennas on those TVs, you move the antennas to get that perfect channel. And once you hit the channel, you have the direct feed of that energy, that frequency, through to give you the channel or information.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same thing with the body. The body is a combination of all the elements, both polarities, positive and negative. It's an electrical system. Okay, our body literally is energy. Every cell in our body has electricity. We communicate through our nervous system, through our heart, with electrical pulses. I mean, this is how we're made up. We have electricity running through our spine constantly. So we're an electrical being. The earth itself has electrical properties. It's a negative ionization, a pull. The air, the atmosphere, has a mostly positive polarization of ions. So when you have your feet on the ground, you're connecting to this negative field. And then when you have your arms in the air, you're connecting to the positive ionization field. And by breathing, you're regulating the flow of both positive and negative polarities into the body.
Mm-hmm.
And by doing that, what you're doing is you're becoming a bridge. You're becoming the pillar between heaven and earth. You're circulating that fresh chi or fresh electricity energy through the breath through your body, and you're giving yourself life force. That's what it's all about. So when you change the posture of your body, you change the geometry of your body. And by changing the geometry of your body, you change the direction and flow of how that energy from heaven and earth circulates and moves through the body.
Mm-hmm.
And even with mudras.
Yeah, same thing.
Same thing. Your meridian systems come in and out through your hands and feet. And by touching various points or holding different mudras, what you're doing is you're telling the body to focus the energy or direct the energy in a specific manner for a specific purpose.
Right.
So that is how I kind of got into this whole teaching, is seeing that when I would change my body posture, I would feel a different connection to a different energy, a different frequency. And when I would hold that frequency, it would build what I perceived. It would build this unique energetic structure within and around the body. And then when you change the posture, you change the field again into these new things that you continue to build.
Right.
And another way I could describe this to make it a little more simple is imagine your body as a stringed harp, for example. So you have multiple strings through your body, and each string has its own unique tuning. And if you just, let your harp go and never tune it, over time, those strings are going to get loosened. They're going to change their tones. And when you play the harp, it's not going to play, the right music. So by doing these postures or connecting to these different energetic systems, what you're doing is you're trying to retune the strings of your body to get you back into your own universe, your one song that you are.
Right.
That's
fascinating. I wanted to bring up the Taoist perspective. Of course, again, my philosophy comes a little bit more east and yours too with the Neigong and the Qigong. But there is such a thing as the microcosmic orbit. And as you were talking, I wanted to bring this graphic up for the audience members to capture what you were saying about connecting from the earth and also to the stars, essentially. And you mentioned the breathing part. So I'm going to get into that here too, because I want to share with the audience members maybe 3 or 4 of the practices in this book today to make it very practical for them moving forward. If you guys are following along with us, we're now talking about the postures and how they work. That's at page 20. But I wanted to ask you, Jason, in your travels around the world, you've explained now that in some of your dreamscape, maybe in some of your astral work, you saw these individuals and temples in certain positions. You knew you had to emulate them. But that was dream or also in astral. Did you also, visiting sites around the planet, see maybe perhaps cave drawings, maybe perhaps architecture that would also suggest that right there in your face, ancient knowledge had been imbued in perhaps some cathedrals around the world? I did this episode with Jade Widener. We talked about the mysteries of the cathedrals, the Fulcanelli book. Where did you also see that in physicality here? And what can you share with the audience to show that this knowledge is in fact actually here and in our architecture?
Well, when I first started to have these journeys, not only did I go to the library, but the first place I went to was the Royal Ontario Museum.
The ROM, yeah.
And there are, I would say, hundreds of artworks and statues there, especially from the Far East, like Indonesia, China, Tibet, Japan. And a lot of those statues, like if you look at the Buddhist or Shinto statues, they're standing in various postures. They're holding mudras. And it was this huge moment for me where, I can go to the Egyptian section, for example, because they have the Egyptian exhibit at the ROM, and you can see the statues. And there was one statue that was very interesting to me. It's the younger Horus. The Horus is a child, and he's standing there, putting his finger on his chin. And there was multiple depictions of that, but like, why is Horus, the child, standing there with touching his chin. It didn't make any sense. And then you can move forward and you can go to the Greek and the Roman, and you can see they're emulating the Egyptians. They're standing in the same postures as the Egyptian statues. And then you go down to the Far East section and you're going to the Buddhist statues, and they're I would say they're more complex. Actually, they're standing in various postures, they're holding mudras, they're smiling, they're dancing. Very complex posture system. And for me, it was like seeing this evolution of these postures and the evolution of passing down this history of body movements that's not just found in China, even though China has been doing Qigong for 4,000 plus years. I would even say longer than that.
Yeah.
But the body postures are found in every ancient culture, in shamanic dancing. This is a global thing. And once I went to the museum and I'm looking at it with this new perspective, these new eyes, you can see they're trying to show us something. It's like, it's the same thing with jewelry. Like, we wear jewelry today to make us feel better, I guess, more attractive or whatever we're wearing jewelry for. But in ancient times, the jewelry was more of like adorning the body with frequency tools. So they would wear like precious metals, which is electroconductive. They would wear special stones that had very specific frequencies, and they would put them on very specific energy centers, just like the ancient crowns.
Yeah.
It wasn't to show that okay, they're in power. It's showing that they are empowered themselves by expanding or connecting to other types of realities or states of mind. So that's where I started to see the connection is actually going to the museum.
Yeah, that's fascinating. For me too, the museum was big as a kid, and the religious things. My parents were religious, and as a kid, they would bring me to churches. And when we were traveling, we'd still have to go to church on Sunday. So I was exposed to all these churches, and not wanting to listen to what the guy was saying in front, I was looking at the architecture, and I was fascinated by some of these examples of the pineal gland, kundalini snakes. Like, they're everywhere if you really just pay attention and start looking at the fact that they're holding this information. It's in your face, but it's still obfuscated and occulted in many cases from our understanding. And I love these conversations. I'm looking at the people in the chat. I'm like, wow, this is so fascinating. Let's get into the Ankh per se. I read this book maybe 20 years ago, or a few of Jean-Claude Melchizedek's book, actually. But in one of them, he talked about Egyptian sexual ankhing. Now, in your particular case, you're talking about using the body as an antenna in certain positions. You also talk in your book about the breathing. We'll get into the breathing a little bit later. But what Jean-Claude was suggesting was that the ankh was also a circular energy flow in the body, that if you can master through your breath work and your visualization of this energy, you could loop, and every time you would loop this energy, you would increase the charge in the body. And of course, being in sacred geometry in pyramids would focalize and even magnify that energy as well. So there's a lot there to be learned from some of these techniques. But what is your understanding of the Ankh, and how is that pervasive now in perhaps many other cultures today with different symbols, but it always comes back to the same principal core concept of the Ankh? So let's explain that for the audience here who don't know about that. And that's at page 50 in your book.
It's complicated because we really don't know exactly where the original Ankh came from. Now, if we really go back, many people suggest that the Ankh is actually part of the spine of the bull. It's a vertebrae. So if you look at the thoracic vertebrae of an ox, it's the same shape as an Ankh. So, the ox, the bull, the cosmic bull, was venerated back then. And it was the symbol of power itself. Life itself was the spine of the bull because, it helped them in the farming and moving. Like that's how they built their empires, through farming and agriculture. So there's that side of it. The next side of it is, if you look at certain Ankhs from Egypt, one of them has like a straight line going down, and then some of them have two, almost like feet. And in some of the images of Egypt, the Ankh is shown as a person. So it's the arms, it's the legs, it's the head.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not entirely familiar with Drunvalo Melchizedek's use of it, so I can't really know what he's talking about with that.
Mm-hmm.
But the Ankh itself is a flow of energy. Many people would say that it's the vertical energy going down, the horizontal, and the cosmic, or the divine energies that come in and through, which you can, I guess, breathe through. It was always the symbol of life.
Mm-hmm.
It represented the life force energy that nourished our entire bodies. And in the pictures of Egypt, the Ankh was usually given by the gods to the pharaohs, and it was placed underneath their noses, or in front of their eyes or their mouths. The Ankh was shown with water. It was shown with the rays of the sun, and with the manna, the food of life. This was showing that these forces of nature gives us life, and it sustains us.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it was also the gift of the gods. So whenever you see a picture of a god standing there with an Ankh giving it to somebody, it was more of a depiction of the god is now giving you new life to take forward into this world.
Mm-hmm.
So there's many depictions of it, but this symbol carries forward. It's not just an Egyptian symbol. And if you take the top off the Ankh, then you're left with a T. Or in ancient letters, it was called the Tau.
Mm-hmm.
And see, there you go. The Tau, the Taurus, and the cross. So the Tau was also the symbol of the constellation Taurus, which is the heavenly bull, which also relates back to the original Ankh, which could be a vertebrae of the spine. And then the early Christians also adopted the Tau as their symbol of Christianity before the cross. So before the cross that we know today was introduced, the first Christians carried around the Tau
Mm-hmm.
as the symbol of life and resurrection and all these things. So at first it was about, and by the way, the Tau is also the last letter of the Hebrew and Phoenician alphabet. It's the last letter. It means the cross. That's the definition of it. It's the 22nd letter of the alphabet. And it's the completion of all the signs. It's the completion of life, is what the Tau is supposed to be. And it's for judgment. So if you take the Tau and you put two scales on it, you get the balancing of the heart. You get the scales. There's just so much in this symbol.
Yeah, we could do a whole show on that.
Yeah.
But I wanted to share one part with the audience too.
Sure.
There was a medicine woman I met in New Mexico, and she spoke of a cave where underneath this mountain, basically, there's this open cave with a body of water, a green crystal, and on the wall is a huge carving of an Ankh. And this is guarded by some of those tribes people. No tourists are allowed to go in there. But I was just fascinated that this is, how long ago was this made? We don't know. It seems to be brought down from generation to generation, but it's still not yet made public. But again, we're being called as humans to all of these places around the world. And in the last 2 years, as these places and energy centers of the planets are also waking up, as we are waking up, our DNA is waking up also. It was so convenient suddenly to have this worldwide thing going on where all the sites were closed and we couldn't, we had the social distance, we couldn't see anybody, we couldn't travel, just as our energy was being called perhaps by these sites. And it strikes me as a little convenient that maybe perhaps they're trying to slow down this awakening, or maybe this connection to who we actually are, where we come from, how much power we actually have. These are all the topics that, oh man, I could do 3 shows a day on this stuff. It's so fascinating. And I can tell from the audience members, there's a lot there as well. So guys, we'll try to get to your questions. We're about 34 minutes into the interview now. So give me a few more minutes here to develop some content with Jason, and then I'll try to bring up some of your questions here at the end of the show.
And just to go back, the whole point of the book, and I know you read the book, the whole thing is I was trying to go back in time. That's all I was trying to do. I was trying to go from the religions we know today, which is like Christianity, Hinduism, Judaism, and then go back through the mystery schools. And what I'm trying to do is just peel away the onion to figure out, how did these stories come into our lives?
Yeah.
You know, how did it all come together, and what is the real roots of this information? And the most amazing thing is that it comes down to this belief as we are a reflection of the universe. And by knowing thyself, knowing our place in the environment, we understand who we are.
Yeah.
So all these things are tools in relearning who we are. All these symbols, like you were showing the Ankh, these are just symbols to reawaken our consciousness to something that's very profound and ancient, that has a story to it. And if we understand that story, it gives us amazing insight. And what I personally learned a lot doing the research for this book is that it all comes from the stars. And it was like the stars were the map of heaven. And then what they would do is they would map heaven, give the qualities of the soul above, soul below to the zodiac, create these amazing stories that would pass on this information through the generations. And that information was encoded in various creation myths, biblical texts. And it was just because the language changed or the stories changed, the exact information remained the same throughout time.
This is the floor plan of the Notre Dame de Paris Cathedral. So again, going back to what you're saying now, this is imbued in everything around us, if only we have the eyes to see. So one, yes, I do recommend Jason's book. You can find it here on Amazon. I just put the link in the live chat. And after the show, I'll also pin the links to the top of the comment sections. But if you want to get into some of this architecture, I do recommend this, Fulcanelli's Le Mystère des Cathédrales. That's the French version. You can find it in English. And also Jay Widener's book, which was The Mysteries of the Great Cross of Henday. And again, all of this connects to the life force that is all surrounding us. Fascinating stuff. Okay, there's a lot to go through here, Jason. Perhaps we'll have to do a part 2, but let's get into the breathing part. Okay.
Yes.
So in these last 2 years, of course, humans have been put to a lot of stress. And for a lot of us, it's been overwhelming. A lot of people have had some issues with family, with friends, even with themselves. So not only was the universe asking them to maybe cut cords, to maybe get off of the karmic wheel they were on, maybe get them through that core wound so that they can become that better human. But on top of having all of that, they were also having to deal with the stress of the last 2 years, and we don't need to get into that. Now, breathing is essential here. You've talked about the breathing to regulate that energy flow in these different antennae position, but let's talk about also the breathing from the concept of just grounding right now, which is something that everybody, regardless of if you want to get into Qigong, Neigong, or these postures of power, grounding will benefit you to the immense degree right now. So that's page, let me see, 138, I believe it was. Yeah, energy and grounding or breathing. No, it's one before that. Hold on, I have it in a tab here. But let's talk about your experience. You had an accident, you were caught where basically all you had to do was thinking about your breathing here. Explain that to the audience, how you got to really practice that and really embody what it is to be master of your own breath.
Well, unfortunately, I broke my back in 2017. And it was bad. I broke my T7 right behind my heart, and I had to do emergency surgery. 2 rods, 10 screws are holding my back together. So that 0 stars. I do not recommend breaking your back.
No. There's easier ways to learn.
Easier ways to learn. Yeah. And you know, I would practice Qigong daily, but now I can't move. Like, I'm not paralyzed, but I can't move because obviously the surgery and what happened to me. So the only thing I could have done, or the only thing I could do in the bed in the hospital, was breathe. The only thing I could use was my mind and my breath. And that's what I did. I just concentrated on this deep breath that I teach in the book, which is the full body breathing, where you're breathing in through your nose, slowly down into your stomach where the dantian is. Every time you breathe in, your stomach expands. When you breathe out, your stomach contracts. And I would just meditate like this. I would just focus on the breathing. That's all I would do. And I entered into, in the hospital, in one of these meditations, I entered into an altered state of consciousness where I had this visualization happen, where I saw this coil. It looked like a copper coil, like a heating element of a stove. And there was this invisible or semi-invisible field next to it. And every time I would breathe, this field would get closer to the coil. And once it touched the coil, when the field touched the coil, suddenly the coil lit up like a heating element. It just went bright red hot. And when this happened in the vision, every cell in my body felt like a Kundalini explosion. It just felt like every cell in my body became a ball of fire. And my pain went from, let's say, like a 10 out of 10 to like a 20 out of 10. No, my pain went way down.
I went up. Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah. It was, yeah, it hurt. But I knew that this was something magical that just happened. Like, this is an experience. I'm in the experience, and now I have to guide it. So I focused intently, solely focused on the breakage of my back. And when I did this, the pain went up substantially, and the muscles in my back started to spasm very, like this, just spasm like crazy. And I felt like it was moving my back around, and I felt like the bones were popping and clicking into different places. And then after that experience, I started to recover very quickly. You know, it's for me, it was like, wow, like I somehow activated this healing ability that our body naturally has, and it just kicked in, and I accessed it through this breathing meditation, just the breathing. And it just blew me away that such a powerful experience happened to me just doing a breathing meditation. You know, so that's when I really got into the power of breath. And we're talking about now grounding, and you know why it's important. We have to first understand why we're not grounded. Yeah, most people live in their head. Okay, so you're top heavy, you're going to fall over. That's why you're not grounded. And people have to understand that,
especially for you and I, we're 6'4" and 5. So when we're top heavy,
oh yeah, when we fall hard. Okay, we have to be careful. You know, so our minds, or people's minds, are usually very scattered. They're all over the place. They're thinking of multiple things at once. They have chatter in their heads. And what we have to first understand is every thought needs energy. Okay. So every time you have a thought, you're sending energy out of your body. Okay. You're like now the sending antenna every time you have a thought. So you're sending energy out of your brain or wherever. So if you're constantly, you know, having different things run through your mind, you're constantly bleeding energy. Okay. So first of all, we have to breathe and let go and try to silence that mind. That's number one. And then once we silence the mind, then we have to go within and be present. That's the next step. So we have to go in and just sit with ourself. All right, this is the actual practice. Is you just sit quietly. If your mind goes, bring it back. Focus on your breath. Be completely present in the moment. And when your eyes are closed, you're bringing your brain waves down. Okay, so when your eyes are open, you start to activate the beta wave consciousness, which is between 15 and 33 hertz of a brain cycle. When you close your eyes, you start to drop the beta cycle down into alpha wave, which is what we want for meditation. So what we're doing is we're bringing the brain waves down, we're focusing being present within the body, and then now the body consciousness is going to speak to us. This is the next step. So now the body will start to tell us if there's uncomfort, there's pain, there's blockages, what's going on with the body. And then after we breathe through that, suddenly we get the whole breath down through our bodies and we can feel it connecting to the earth. All right. So there's a process of grounding, and it's not just simply putting the feet on the ground, because if my mind is out in the middle of nowhere, it doesn't matter if my feet are on the ground. Yeah. So, and it takes practice. I mean, I've been meditating for 20 plus years, and I still have to get into it when I go into my meditative process, Yeah.
For me, one of the first realizations I had when I was trying to ground was I was feeling either the chair or the mattress behind me. And then I was like, oh, wait, that mattress is touching a wooden frame. And then I would follow my breath into the wooden frame. And then, oh, those legs are touching the floor. Oh, that floor is touching the foundation. And then I would get into the ground. Anyways, there's a fabulous process. The most powerful grounding exercise I've ever done was in the not the galactic medicine wheel at the ECETI, but the other circle. What was the other circle called?
The Pleiadian.
The Pleiadian circle.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's a story for a whole show. But anyways, so powerful breathing and grounding exercise I did there with a crystal. It was just absolutely through the roof. I'll get to that maybe at the end of the show here. Going back to the breathing, you had mentioned how you felt this huge fire. You said that word when you started here. I want to bring up this slideshow here too. When I did this first series, again, this was banned even before we went live. I got an email from YouTube that my show was going to be deleted. I'm like, well, we verified your content and it's inappropriate. I'm like, well, we haven't had the show yet. But we were going to talk about breath work in this particular position, the Yab Yang, and how it relates to this. And then eventually this. So when you talk about that fire, what you can do yourself, imagine when you start multiplying that in the love frequency with a partner, and you start circulating that breath and calibrating that energy flow. So not just yourself. And then this particular sacred geometry, 1 + 1 does not equal 2. This is exponential energy. And every time you go through that loop, as Jean-Claude Melchizedek was explaining in his sexual honking, let me bring that back down too. Someone was asking the link for that. You guys can go and read that. It's fascinating stuff. I think Jean-Claude there, just my opinion, part of this information was very male energy oriented in the way that it was expressed. So I always felt that there was a missing part of that, which would have been the counter divine feminine energy perspective of this. So perhaps we as humans, we could still benefit from downloading more of this information as we practice this more and more towards self-mastery. But at any rate, this breath work, people were saying, wow, when you said that earlier, the immense rehausser en français, augmentation that you feel from controlling your breath, even in the first experiences, even if you think, oh, I did it all wrong, my thoughts were all over the place, the kids were making noise, you still get something out of it. And the more you go, the more you get. And in Kung Fu, we talk about all of this breath work and meditation, even before we start combat, and of course, after we combat, to bring all of those energies back in. So thank you, Jason, for that. And I hope the audience members do go and check out your book. Very fascinating stuff when you get to that as well. Okay, next thing, Kundalini Cobra. I thought we'd bring that up, of course. That's one of my favorite topics. For those of you who are following us, it's on page 178. Let's talk about this position here. Is that the right one? Nope, 78.
Nope.
Nope. Salute of the Sun is the one before that. Hold on, where's my tab? I had it. Did I lose my tab? I thought it was 168. Hold on. Do you remember?
Let me.
Oh, there it is. Okay, no, 188. Oh, sorry.
Well, I have to explain. I just have to explain what the Kundalini is. So,
Yep.
You have to go way back into history, about the Egyptians, where the serpent, or the fire, they would call it the fire serpent, was the symbolization of the ascent of energy through the body to gain attainment or enlightenment, or have that connection. The serpent was the soul of Osiris, the soul of Horus, So these were active principles. And then when that moved into the Vedic texts, it was more of this energy that sits at the base of the spine. And this is also why, like the Jed pillar is known as the spine of Osiris, or the spine of the bull, because the energy of the spine is extremely important. We call it the sacral of the spine. It translates to sacred. It's the sacred place. And this is where the energy is stored in the body. And it's this energy potential, spiritual energy, electrical energy. And through different breath works of that connection of the positive ionization with the negative ionization, it's like a battery. And by regulating the breath or the tantra or the qigong or the meditation, it's all the same thing. What you're doing is you're stimulating the fire. You're growing the fire in your belly. And so you're growing the fire in the dantian area. And as you're growing that fire actually starts to drop down. So the fire from the belly, I'm trying to explain it. It drops down into the sacrum, the sacred part of the spine, like the tailbone area within the hip. And then this energy starts to ascend up through the spine. And this is also depicted as the caduceus coil and the symbol of healing, the two spirals of energy. Yes. And that is the staff of Osiris. It's 2,000-year-old image of that. And as it's going up the staff, and what's the staff? The staff is your spine. All right. So the staff is the spine. At the top of the spine, if you look at the staff of Osiris, you have a pine cone. There's a pine cone sitting on top of that. And many people believe that the pine cone is the symbol of the pineal gland, which is your connection to the sacred light, which is the light within the temple of God, which is your body. So it's to access, it's the connection of the serpents ascending the spine, or the fire ascending the spine as the kundalini, activating the pineal gland so that you can have the spiritual light to visualize and see the spiritual light within you as the temple of God or the temple of man. So that's what it is. And I've had multiple kundalini experiences. They weren't all the same, which I want people to know. It's not one definition of what it is. One time it felt like a strong magnet, like a strong magnetic force, and it would push up like this through the spine. And every time it hit a chakra, the only way I could describe it is there's ghosts there. So it hits these ghosts, and you're like, oh man, those ghosts aren't supposed to be there.
Yeah.
So you keep breathing through it, and it punches those things.
And they're not
out.
too happy of you disturbing them also.
No, they get very angry that you're. So once this connection is made, it's like whatever is holding on in these places is being disconnected and literally purged out as it starts to go through the body.
Yeah.
So in the Kundalini picture that you showed, it's a movement and a breathing technique to move the energy of the Kundalini, or to stimulate the energy of the Kundalini up the central channel of the body and up the spine.
That's fascinating work, man. We could do a whole show just on that particular part. And what was interesting about the Jed Tower also, if you notice, this is also at the base of a Jedi's sword. So there's a lot of symbolism there in terms of where all of this power comes from. What do you make of blood types? I wasn't going to ask you this, and how that perhaps translate to different vehicles on this planet being able to hold different types of chars for different types of missions. Have you studied that at all, Jason? And if so, where does that tie in here, perhaps?
I personally haven't.
Okay.
My wife has. She loves blood types, especially with dieting. There's different foods for different blood types.
Right.
But it's a very interesting question. I know that someone like me, who I think is like an AB or something blood type, it's like I can go vegetarian very easily. I could live like that very easily. Whereas like someone who's like a type O, they need their meat. It's like you can't take their meat away from them because that's where their energy comes from.
Mm-hmm. What's interesting in Star Wars, they talk when they test the kid, it's like, oh, his midichlorians are high in this one or whatever. So again, has something to do with how much chi, energy, whatever, kundalini, prana. It's all the same words of how we can hold that charge. I thought it was fascinating. And I think there's more there also. Humans are, in most of the Western worlds, we don't think of blood types really and how important they impact who we are and what we're supposed to do on this planet. But I think a lot of that information is still occulted. So I always ask my guests if they've come across this information because I'm trying to figure out what it all means, where they all come from, where the negative, basically the RH negative come from. It's all very fascinating to me. So perhaps for another show. Guys, if you have questions for Jason, now's the time. Please put them in high caps in the chat section. I'll try to bring that up here for Jason. As we go, I had a first one here a little bit earlier. I saved it. Delberta was asking, JC, ask Jason how he changed his diet and how important it was in his journey.
That was the first thing that I had to change. So before I knew anything, I had to change my diet. And basically what I was told was eat local, eat fresh, don't eat processed foods, don't drink water unless it's like real spring water or well water, like just water from the earth, because of all the impurities and metals and things that are in our food and water. Eat organic as much as you can. And they also told me to like bless the food and water to take off any of the negative energies from it. Mm-hmm. So that's how I started. But what I really started to do was I got into fasting. So I would do like, I love the master cleanse, the one with the lemonade and the cayenne pepper, maple syrup. We're from Canada, right?
Yeah, so, I've done that one quite a few times.
So I've done that a lot, and it really gave me a much better foundation to move forward. So I had to learn that.
Wow. Okay. Very good. Let me see about this one. Okay. Let me start this one. I'll go back here. I'm trying to add this in order. Amy is asking, question, does Jason offer classes? Now, of course, with COVID, probably not in person, but do you do online seminars?
I'm going to.
Okay.
You know me, I'm like in the background. I don't step forward too many times. But
I don't know why. You're doing a great job.
Well, I mean, I will be doing it.
We'll be doing it.
I will be doing it, and when I make that decision, I'll send it to you, and you can tell your people.
Well, why don't we talk about this here? We can find you, of course, at thecrystalsun.com. There you have, you're a fan of crystals, so am I, is here. Why don't we talk about this here? And is this where also maybe in the events section, if you do training and seminars, is this where it will show up?
Yes, I will finally use that button if I do it.
Okay. Love it. Okay. And talk about these crystals here. What's special about these, and why are you so passionate about this particular type?
Well, for me, it's like the crystal has to choose you. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's, for example, where say I got crystals everywhere, man. Like the first crystal that chose me was the Arkansas quartz. Wow. So I actually went down to Arkansas and handpicked all these. So it's like, that's why I have a connection to it. So that's why I have them all over my house. I sell them. And then the next stone that called to me was a local stone called Orlite 23, which comes from Thunder Bay, Ontario. Yeah, it's a very rare stone, very old amethyst. Comes from one of the oldest parts of the Canadian Shield, which is billions of years old. And it's a type of amethyst that has so many, 23 different metals within the crystal. So some of these crystals have a lot of metal in it, which gives it this kind of otherworldly feel to it, this powerful energy to it. And it's just interesting because my wife was very drawn to this stone. And then we moved to north of Toronto. When we got married, we moved north to Toronto. And one of my neighbors is the guy who owns the mine, and we became friends. So it's like it was almost like we were just pulled into this stone. It's like we moved out of the city to find this stone. And it was just an amazing thing. And then when I started to meditate with it, I had these incredible experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And I just knew I had to kind of get it to the people, start selling them. And that became one of my sources of income. So I became a crystal-aholic. Is that what you call them? Like
Crystal-holic.
Crystal-holic. I was obsessed with crystals, and I'm still obsessed with crystals. And
Me too.
I don't know if you can see in the background. I don't know if I could show you, but I have boxes of crystals behind me. You know,
same thing in my house. There's so many crystals. Sometimes they scream at night. You have to kind of put blankets over them because they're so excited. There's so much going on in the house. Okay, let me bring that back up. The link for the audience here, thecrystalfund.com. And there you can find the crystals on that page as well. Another question, Jason, for you. Hold on. I'm going to go back to this list here. George is asking, hey, is there a video to accompany the book? So some of these postures, they're a little bit complicated to read through. Do you have videos also, or do you plan on doing that in the future?
I believe it's page 192. If you go to page 192, this is just by memory here.
That's the conclusion of the sun.
Yes, right at the bottom it says private video of the salute to the sun can be found, and it gives a link. So yes, there's a link, a private link. I will
put that. Is that okay if I put that link in the comment section here as well?
It's just for the people that are doing the postures with the book.
Okay, so we'll keep it at that.
I'm trying to keep things separate here.
Okay,
but I'm actually thinking that maybe soon in the future, I'm just going to put everything up for free and just get it out there.
Right, that makes sense. Okay, and also, it's the same thing in Reiki. There's a reason why these symbols are not open to everyone. You kind of have to be initiated into it. You have to do the work. It's not a free-for-all. There's a certain respect that goes with this work that has to be adhered to. I totally understand that, Jason. Len is asking, JC, please ask Jason how he protects himself during astral travel. Okay, I wanted to go back to that. We spoke about that at night. When I had my first experience, this led me to reading on how to actually do it as opposed to being spontaneous, to actually practice, to get out of body. I did all of these travels. And then I eventually met some people there that were not so nice, and they scared the hell out of me, and I stopped doing this. And this was about, by that time, maybe 21 years of age. So let's talk about the bad people in some of the astral and how you protected yourself from it.
People may not like my answer. There's no such thing as protection. All right. And the only protection that you have is the strength that you carry in your will, basically. So you have to know that these things can't hurt you. Mm-hmm. You have to know that you are stronger than it, and you have to know that you can get out of any situation and you're safe. Mm-hmm. It is scary. There's a lot of things there that are not so friendly. Yeah. And sometimes you have to fight your way out of things. Mm-hmm. But again, it's the only way to protect yourself is by strengthening your own energy. Mm-hmm. The more you strengthen your own energy, the less these things could pull you. Mm-hmm. So if you come out, weak, it's, this is a lot of people have a lot of issues when they're doing channeling or doing these meditations when they're very weak. Sometimes they could attract negative entities to them and they'll attach onto them. Mm-hmm. So, and that, I'll just say that is actually the first step of initiation. All right. Because mm-hmm. how else are you going to know how to get rid of these things unless you have them? Right. So you kind of have to experience, what these things are and then how to deal with them, because you can go to like a shaman or, energy healers and they could pull these things off you, no problem, but they'll just come back because you haven't learned how to do it.
Right. And the same thing with crystals and other trinkets. To me, it's like taking pot or taking a drug to get to a certain level. Yeah, it's helpful sometimes to get to that next level, but essentially you're still relying on a crutch as opposed to the endogenously produced chemicals that you can produce yourself to get to those same levels. So the same thing with the crystals and outer protection spells and the smudging, they work to some extent, but at the end of the day, you realize that the shaman doesn't need any of those trinkets. He is his own protection by the nature of the strength of his willpower and his energy, and speaking with confidence when he speaks to these other entities. That's where it makes a difference. Somebody's in the chat's asking, and it ties into some of yours and my experiences at ESETI. Leslie's saying, hey, James has this, I think it's called the Unseen Influences, the prayers for the unseen influences. How does that work? Does it really work? Does it work temporarily? Bring that into the conversation, Jason.
We have to understand that everything is a tool, right? So even these prayers, they're maps. They're maps of consciousness to direct your intentions, your mind, your focus. It's the same thing with a crystal. Crystals have power, energy, like you said, but it takes you focusing your power and will through them that makes that magic happen. So all these things, like you can say, are crutches. And it's like, you know, if you have a powerful crystal and then suddenly you're faced with something and you're like, well, where's my crystal? I don't have it. It's like, are you just going to like give up? No, you're not. You're going to learn how to deal with the situation without anything.
Precisely.
And that's kind of part of the initiation process. And I don't want to scare anybody in that, but it's like in my personal journey, that's literally the only thing that's happened to me. It's literally, here you go, Jason. Here's a terrible situation. Figure it out.
Deal with it and grow up. I get that all the time.
And you do it more than a couple times, and then you're like, okay, I get it. And now I could deal with it. Yeah. And that's how you move forward.
I always felt, though, maybe as a, not a caveat, but as a precursor to what you just said, I always felt that my guides, my ancestors were there if I got really, really in trouble, but still, for the most of it, I had to go through the scrapes and bruises to understand myself. You know what I mean? Like I felt I had support, but I knew it was all about me. Like I learned that really quickly, because when you start traveling in these spheres, you realize how nebulous and dangerous it actually is. And at the end of the day, it's all about you. Again, this road to self-mastery through the Torii gate between the mundane and the sacred, only you can do that. People can show you the way, but you are the one who crosses that threshold. And again, it's all about that self-mastery.
I will just simplify it. And even though, you know, people already know this answer, but if you carry fear and doubt and guilt and shame, like if you carry these emotions within you, that's what these things love. I mean, that's their portal within you.
Yeah.
So if you're dealing with these things, if you can separate yourself and just be in love, you know, I know there's real woo right there, but if you can literally have that compassion, be in love in that state, these things don't come near you.
That would probably be the highest form. I agree with you. But as a step to that, maybe for some people who are experimenting, I would also suggest that just being in alignment to who you are, speaking your truth, walking your truth, even that eliminates a lot of those cracks in that shield through which they would go. Eventually, of course, holding that love frequency is the killer of all of it. You know, love conquers everything. That is for sure.
Learn how to say no.
Yeah.
Honestly, learn how to say no. These things come at you, you're just like, no, not having it.
Yeah. This far, no further, like Picard said to the Borg. There you go. Britt, please, Jean-Claude, make Jason come back. Well, I can ask him. I can't make him, but I'd love to have you back, Jason, anytime.
I'll be back, of course.
You talked about this map, the crystals and meditations and prayers are maps, you know, to get to specific frequencies. I'd like to end on this map of North America. There's this huge quadre of our population that are following this map to find the very elusive Sasquatch. And I believe I found one.
Oh, my God.
Okay, explain that, Jason, so we can laugh a little bit of ourselves, because I did the same pose as you did. Somebody took a picture of me, and I have to find it because I wanted to put them side by side tonight, but I couldn't find it for the show. What's going on here? What's this, Jason?
This is my first time at ESETI Ranch. Yeah. And behind the picture was actually Jimmy Church and his wife Rita and a bunch of people. And they were all talking, and I just kind of stood in the bush copying that sign to get a picture taken.
That's fun.
But we always would joke around because, you know, I'm 6'4", and, you know, so I'm always one of the tallest people there. And they just said, you know, I shouldn't have shaved for this picture.
Yeah, I love it. Next time, what's his name? Stephen Cambian. He has a Sasquatch shoot, right? He told me about that in one of our shows. I'm like, oh man, we should totally do a gag on. He said he have Jason walk through the forest in his suit. That would be so hilarious.
I would caution anybody dressing up as Bigfoot, you're probably going to get shot.
You're probably going to get shot. Yeah. Oh, you never know. Man. Hey, Jason, we're already past the hour here. I wanted to ask you, I guess, last things from the book. Is there anything else that you think is important for the audience to know tonight? Either about the book, your website, any new projects coming up. Anything else you thought maybe before preparing the show that you wanted to share with the audience, or anything coming down now in download as we're doing this live that you think is important to share before we part ways today?
I think we pretty much covered everything. And, you know, I would just say that when I started to go through my process of awakening, I would search for books. You know, I would try to find the answers that were in me. And now that I'm older and have the ability to do it, I'm like writing the book for my past self. Right. That's what these books are. This is the book that I wanted when I was growing up.
Yeah.
And so if I could share what I've learned over the past 20 plus years, and that helps somebody on their journey, that's what I'm here for.
Wow. Beautiful. I love it. So folks, you can find that at amazon.com.ca here. Of course, you're looking for Egyptian Postures of Power. This is the one we want, the latest edition of 2021. The first one, I believe, was 15 or 16, Jason?
The first book I ever wrote was 2007 or 2008.
But that wasn't about the Postures of Power.
It was Postures of Power, but it was a flip book that I printed myself.
Oh, wow.
So that's how long it's gone back. And then I republished it around 2015.
Okay. Oh, that's what that was. Okay. I see. Okay. Well, guys, go check him out. He's got quite a few books here on Amazon.
No. I took every book down except the Egyptian Postures book.
Ah, okay. So, is this one? Can you still get this one?
Yeah, no, you can't get it.
Ah, okay. All right. Well, sorry about that. I didn't
remember. Because I have to now rewrite all those other books. Jeez.
Aha. Well, you have a lot of work in front of you, Jason. Folks, you can find Jason's work here at thecrystalsun.com. And you can also find him on a daily basis on his Twitter at twitter.com/Jason_quit. This was our first episode of Egyptian Postures of Power. I'm Jean-Claude BeyondMystic. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you soon. Au revoir.